My name is Stacey Janes. Specifically, I'm from a part of Iridetto called Cloakwear for Automotive. It's the Automotive Security Division. Iridetto is a security company. It's been doing security for about 50 years. There we go. Of that, I've been doing security for about 25. I was a developer, I was an architect, and specifically, I was an ethical hacker. So inside of Iridetto, I wasn't a pen tester, that's not what I did. I would actually go do forensics work on people who got hacked, try to figure it out. And sometimes I would try to hack the hacker to see what they were doing and how they were doing it. Specifically, I want to talk a bit about connectivity. I mean, that's why we're here. There's lots of opportunities, but there's also risks. And I'll give a little bit about a hacker's view of what connectivity means to me, and a little bit about how to defend yourself. So the thing about the automotive industry, and I had to applaud them for this, is that a lot of industries take on connectivity one problem at a time. The automotive industry took on pretty much all of the problems at the same time. They have lots of antennas, lots of incoming input from lots of types of sources. And then we're going to see V2X, car-to-car communication. So that's going to bring in a whole other set of threats. I'm going to kind of keep this, I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to kind of keep this to a couple of financially motivated attacks. I mean, there's everything about safety, people already get that, so I'm not going to go into it. So one is going to be personal theft of theft of personal data. It happens all the time, I mean, look at Equifax, right? And it happens off of all kinds of devices, mobile phones, computers, back-end servers, cloud infrastructure, and it's eventually going to end up in vehicles. As we put more and more of our personal information in these vehicles, more and more attackers are going to try to steal it. And the other one is ransomware. Everybody's heard of it. Ransomware has a huge return on investment. There's a huge financial incentive to do it. And ransomware moved from encrypting your pictures and charging you $100 in Bitcoins, going on to ransomwaring factories and fleets, shutting down infrastructure, shutting down hospitals. So the ransomware model is migrating towards bigger and bigger things. So I'll give you a little bit of a view of how a hacker thinks. I've spent my entire career thinking maliciously. That's been, effectively my job. And as entertaining as it is, it does give you a distinctive view. So a hacker has an advantage over the people they're attacking. Specifically, most people don't think maliciously. Most people don't walk down the street, walk past a nice house and go, wow, that's a nice house. I wonder how I could break into it and steal everything. But the reality is the people who are going to come after you, that's how they think. It's how can I get into that thing and take whatever I need. Also, when you're doing engineering, you always run into problems. There's always little bugs and stuff like that, and they get prioritized. And you'll come across these edge cases like, well, that will happen 1 in 1 million times. So that's really got a low priority. Maybe it doesn't get fixed in this release. As a hacker, I know you're doing that. So if that little edge case I can exploit to turn into a vulnerability, that's what I'm going to look for, right? If you're trying to score a goal, you always go for the corners. You don't shoot at the goalie in the middle. It's the same kind of thing. You go for the edge cases because you know not every little thing has made it into that release. Companies release products, right? That's why you exist. You're going to build these cars, you're going to build these devices, you're going to release them. As an attacker, I can get my hands on them. I can buy it. I can take it apart. I can reverse engineer it. The attacker doesn't necessarily release things, so it's really hard to get forensics and to figure out what they are doing. So it's kind of a one-way street. Information is flowing one way for a lot of it. And hacking is black magic to people. When people say, think like a black hat, that actually means something, right? So you don't actually be a black hat, you can be a white hat, but to think in that manner. So if you don't understand how to steal a car, you don't understand how to stop a car from being stolen. If you don't understand how to break into something, you don't understand how to stop somebody from breaking in. Because they have methods you just don't get. If you think it's black magic, then you're not going to be able to stop it. Humans are always the weakest link. So I was talking to someone about ransomware in cars. They were an engineer, and they said, ransomware in cars is way too hard. You got to do this and that, and you got to get on the network and affect this and 100 other things. I said, you're thinking about it the wrong way. You're thinking about it like an engineer. You need to think about it like an attacker. My goal is to make as much money in as short a time as possible with as little effort as possible. So you always go after the human, right? Ransomware on mobile devices and computers was was encrypting your data and you having to get it back. That's not what ransomware in a vehicle would be. I mean, if I encrypt your data in a vehicle, who cares? It probably exists in another spot. The goal is to deny you use of the vehicle, but I don't have to make the vehicle not work. I just have to make you not want to use it. So if there's a vulnerability in the IVI system, I break in, I turn the volume up on the audio system to full, I make the screen flash, I turn the heat up, and I just lock it in that position so it doesn't do anything else. The car's still drivable, you can go to work, or you can do whatever you want to do, but the reality is that the environment will be so unforgiving, because audio systems are pretty powerful nowadays, you just get it towed to your dealer and tell them to fix it. But if 1,000 of those things show up to 1,000 dealerships, and I send an email to the OEM saying, look what I just did, and I'll publish it tomorrow unless you give me money, right? All I'm really doing is I'm going after the people. I just need enough technical advantage to make the people scared, right? That's all you're trying to achieve. It doesn't have to be this big elaborate thing. People think about, when they're talking about protecting data, so if your personal data in the car, you say, well, the data's encrypted, so I'm safe. Or when I transfer data, it's safe because it's encrypted. But the reality is, attackers don't brute force crypto unless they're a researcher and they're trying to make a point or a presentation, or your key entropy is really, really bad. Think of data being encrypted like having a possession of yours being in a bank. When it's in the bank, it's too hard to get at for most thieves, right? For robbing a bank, I'd probably get shot. I hate getting shot. That's not what I'm going to do. The reality is, when it's in the bank, you can't use it either. So you're going to have to go in and get it and take it out to use it. Encryption is the same way. For you to actually use that data, operate on it, and read it, and do whatever, you have to decrypt it. And that is what I'm going to find, that is when I'm going to take it from you. I just need to get onto the endpoint where that data is stored. So I have a little quote here that says, I need to find the ladder, and I'll tell you what that means in a second. But the reality is that ladder is the vulnerability that I need to get in. So when I talk about security, I prefer to actually talk about physical security. People understand it easier. You can touch it, feel it, see it. So, and I talk about security of your house because it's something most people think about, right? They lock their doors, they lock their windows, they have an alarm system. So let's say you have a 2-story house, you live in the country, it's a nice summer day. You've got good doors, good door locks, good window locks. Your house is nice and secure. Right? The problem is, in your backyard or in your neighbor's backyard, there's a shed with a $3 padlock on it, and there's a ladder in that shed. That ladder is the vulnerability, because I know how to pick locks, so a $3 padlock is not even going to slow me down. So now I have a ladder, and you've done a lot to protect the ground floor of your house, because that is how you think I'm going to get in, and it's not. The thing is, I'm going to come in through a 2nd-story window that you probably left open on a nice summer evening, because you thought your ladder was secure, or you didn't even own it, it belongs to your neighbor. I think it's really slow. So now we just need to find the ladder when it comes to telematic security. If you keep track of hacker news, you'll realize at least once a month there's a vulnerability that gets released that lets people break into systems. I mean, how many people here are now researching whether or not the Bluetooth Blueborn bug affects their telematics unit, right? It's an airborne attack over Bluetooth. So, and there's other Linux attacks. There's all kinds of vulnerabilities. And these are the ladders that attackers use to get in. And once an attacker is broken in, that's when the fun begins. Because if your assumption is your telematics unit is safe, that I've got a firewall, no one can break in, then the reality is you've done nothing else except for lock your front door. So the first thing I want to do is steal your data. So I'm not going to decrypt it. I'm not going to go off and try to break your crypto. I'm going to let you decrypt it. So this is a screenshot from a hacker tool. If you read the publications that the researchers do when they break into something, like Chris and Charlie when they did their Jeep, or the Keen guys when they did the Tesla, you'll see screenshots like this. This is the hacker tools that we use. So this is what software looks like to us. And that's the decrypt verify function of some piece of software. After that gets called, the data is in the clear and it's in memory that I can get at. You can see a little parsed data down there, so I know where the data is. So you've decrypted it for me. That's what I wanted you to do. So whether or not you used a 128-bit key or 256-bit key, or I don't really care, because you're going to do it for me. So what if you could process that data, but not have it in this clear state? In the physical world, they already do that. If the bank wants to move its own assets, it actually moves them in a secure manner, right? It moves it using an armored car. So what if you could protect your own data such that when it got decrypted, it could be in a state where you could actually operate on it, but it was still in a binary form, so if an attacker tried to take it, it wouldn't be any use to them. So there's a technology that does that. It's called data transformations. It actually applies a mathematical formula to the data and a mathematical formula to the code that is associated with it, and the two of those go together so that data only works with that code. So then there's reverse engineering to basically make code do something different. Code is just like a flow chart, right? You don't even have to see the code in this. You can kind of tell what it's attempting to do. There's a decision, there's a loop, there's another decision. So what if I could alter your decisions? This is a good one to find. Check file signature. If the signature is good, you're going to open the file. If the signature is bad, you're not. Well, this is what it looks like to me. So there's a little statement here that makes it go one way or the other. I change 1 byte, and it will load files where the signature was bad, and it won't load files where the signature was good. So if I get into your system, I make a 1 byte change, and it will do whatever I want it to do. This is a really good way to break into software that uses passwords, because this is how a lot of people do their password checks. It's wrong, they shouldn't do it, but this is what they do. So if you ever have software that uses a password, you go in, you find a password check, you invert it, and only bad passwords work. It's very handy. So it is. But what if you could hide these decisions? What if you could take all the control flow and just make it, you could take that and make it look like that. It's a mathematical model that takes all the decision points and turns them into a running state machine so that you can't figure out where the decisions are made. It's the same model that transforms the data into the same state machine. So that way, you can't go jumping around because the math fails. And you can't go changing decisions because there are none. It's just a calculation. So what about secure communication? You got a phone that talks to a car, you got a roadside device that talks to a car, you got a car that talks to a car, you got a thing that talks to a thing. When most people think about people breaking in, they always think of this, man in the middle. They say, well, I use SSL, so I'm good. Whatever. The reality is, a lot of people set up SSL wrong, and there's tools to break into SSL if it's set up wrong. So a lot of that can be automated. But let's say you did it all right. Let's say your SSL is latest version, it's all configured properly, and the tools don't work. The problem is, a lot of times, the attacker's here. It's not in the middle. If you're talking about a car talking to a light pole, why would I try to do a man-in-the-middle attack when at night I can go and break open the unit that's on the side of the light pole and start messing with it? And what if I can get that light pole or that traffic light or whatever it is to send you encrypted and signed messages that are bad, except for the encryption decrypts and the signature verifies. So all of a sudden you're getting bad data securely. Do you know what to do with that? Right? Most developers, if they said, well, the signature was good, of course it's good data. And because I know they think like that, or a lot of them think like that, I'm going to take advantage of it. If it's a protocol and it says, one part of the protocol is how much information to read. Well, I'm just going to say, instead of writing 8 bytes, I want you to read 800 bytes. I mean, that's what the Heartbleed attack was, right? The parsers didn't assume what was coming in was going to be bad. So you can still receive secure information, and that information may be malicious. And as V2X becomes bigger, more and more people and devices and more people are going to start making devices that maybe aren't as secure as they should be. So don't make assumptions that just because the signature verified that no one did something bad to it, right? Parsers are very, very important that they're built robustly. Don't make assumptions about the incoming data. And also, the endpoints all need to be secured, because one unsecure endpoint in an ecosystem can ruin an ecosystem. Hackers will get into the unsecured thing and jump to the secured thing. That's what happened to Target a few years ago. They didn't hack into Target. They hacked into a company that was connected to Target, because that company just controlled the HVAC system. And so they didn't really think they needed security. So some suggestions on, what you should do. Do a threat risk assessment. So threat risk assessments is one of the things I used to do when I used to try to figure out how people got hacked. I'm a huge, huge believer in these. If you don't do a proper threat risk assessment, you don't know the threats against your system, you can't properly decide what to do to fix them. If you buy multiple security solutions, I don't care what they are, and they leave gaps between them, then that gap is the hole where the hacker's coming in, right? Your solution has to go together like a puzzle. Take out one piece, that's a hole. So if you don't do a threat risk assessment, you better really, really, really be sure that you understand how that puzzle goes together. And that's what those things are supposed to do. The other thing is use a security in depth approach. If you just have a firewall, and if something gets through that firewall, then that's it. There's nothing else to stop them. If you just use a single technology, and there's a vulnerability against that technology, now you've got a mad scramble to try and get it fixed. If you look in the physical world, like look at a prison. They don't use a single security approach. They have multiple layers, and it's just too hard to get through all the layers. If you look at the physical world, it's the same thing, right? From the experience that I've had, the attackers usually don't go after the crypto. They go after what's around the crypto, all right? Crypto's just really, really hard. Especially the 256-bit key, no one's going to brute force it. They're just not. So if I can get you to do all the decrypting for me, my job is easier. So I just have to get to that point. And if you let them get to that point, then it's not that hard. Protect against reverse engineering. If you look at these attacks, Chris and Charlie and Keen, if you read these reports, they all start off the same way. They get their hands on a vehicle, they reverse engineer it, they find the vulnerabilities, then they attack it. If you stop them at the reverse engineering approach or make that so hard that they can't find some certain things, then they're not going to find the later things, right? Reverse engineering is always the way you start off because, it's like reading a recipe. How am I going to get in here? And roadside units are going to be basically a big proponent of this, right? You're going to want to get into these units to figure it out. You have physical access, so you can get at them. And ensure endpoint integrity, right? And I don't just mean secure boot, I mean all the time. If I get into a running system and modify a running system, then that running system's been modified. It's doing something it's not supposed to be doing. Whether it's 1 second or 10 seconds or for a 4-hour drive, you shouldn't be able to modify something and not get detected. So security must be renewable. There's no such thing as deploying security for the next 15 years. I mean, if you go back 20 years, people use 56-bit DES. Anybody use that today? I hope not. Right? Return-oriented programming didn't show up till about 10 years ago. The attacks from 5 years from now haven't even been invented yet. You need to be able to update what you're doing. Right? The whole concept of static security does not exist. You have connectivity. Help with the forensics. Right? Be able to detect that things are going on and send forensics out about it. Send data back to your operations center so someone can track it so you basically can figure out what's going on. It's a huge, huge help. I'm not an OTA vendor, but OTA is critical. You need to be able to push down change, you need to be able to push down updates, you need to be able to push down new security technologies. That is the way the rest of the connected world works. And diversity over time. If you make something and I hack it, then you make a change, I'm not going to hack the whole thing again. Why would I? What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a differential analysis and find your change. And then I've got a little tiny bit of work to do. There are some of the biggest companies out there, they just push out new updates just to get diversity, to get massive changes out there, and there's technologies to do that. And what they're trying to do is, it just slows down the hacker because they have to restart. So I have 30 seconds left. Sorry for rushing through that, but.
Anyone have a very... sorry, did anyone have a very quick question? Roger, is this quick?
So DSRC-based vehicle-to-vehicle communications sounds hopelessly vulnerable.
I don't believe in hopeless. You're at the beginning of something. Every industry goes through this when we're at the beginning of it, right? Your data's been doing this a long time. We've seen multiple industries go through this. DSRC is not hopelessly broken. DSRC has some challenges, right? It's not just DSRC. It's the concept of things communicating and how they're going to determine whether or not that communication is trustworthy, right? So V2X itself has its challenges. You're going to have robustness of small items not being as high as robustness of big items. How do you know what you're talking to hasn't been tampered with, right? So it's not just DSRC. So I don't want to kind of lay it at their feet, but there are challenges based on a massive trust model and connectivity in that space.